Hi, hello, and welcome everyone to our event today. So we're going to be talking, myself and Mark, about really big conference from Microsoft, Ignite. So we're going to unpack that conference. We've picked out some of the key features that we think are really interesting, some of the announcements, and really today is about us running through our take and what we think Microsoft has said, why it's important, how it works, and what this technology is. And hopefully you can take away something from that and understand how you may look to start adopting some of these capabilities in your own businesses. So starting off, there was a lot of content at Ignite this year. The more of these virtual events that Microsoft has, obviously with recent times, what we're finding, they're packing more and more content into that. So there were lots of announcements about new features. There were lots of improvements, and there's some really good sessions from all the different program managers there. What we noticed is some of the announcements were really just incremental improvements, things we kind of expect as, products move on and version moves on and things change. Some are just GA, right? So really features we've been following for a while. For example, voice for D365. It's been in discussion for a while. It's been in preview. Now that going into GA means we can start to look at leveraging that in our customer space, and our customers can start to leverage that content as well. Some of this is obviously repositioning. So obviously what Microsoft has done is had a look at the way they go to market with some of those products and really just carefully reposition those products, really just in tune with what's happening in the market today. And some of these were fundamental shifts. So what that means is either Microsoft announced a brand new product or line that we hadn't seen before, hadn't thought about, or just a change in direction. So what we've done, myself and Mark, we've gone through all the sessions and the content. We've had a look, we've had a think, we said, well, really what's important. And in the time we've got, we thought we'd pull out a few interesting items that we think would be impactful for our clients as you move into 2022 and 2023. Noting that some of these features are GA today, which means you can adopt them in a production environment. Some of the capabilities are preview, which means you can experiment with them in a non-production environment. And some of them are even in private preview, where we may have to assist you to get onto the preview program to test out that product. But it's always good to know where Microsoft is going and really what's happening in the roadmap from that perspective. So let's start off with the key themes. So what were the key themes that we noticed in the Ignite conference this year? So the first thing was rich information anyway. So what we've seen with where they're going with collaboration services and capability, the intent is to make any information that you need access to as a knowledge worker or line of business worker, have that information available in the place that you're working, be able to pull that information to the fore, pull those records, pull that data, and then directly interact with that data. So there was a key theme around making that kind of seamless transition, stay where you are working and pull that information in. AI everywhere. So Microsoft has made huge investments into AI over the last number of years. And what we're finding is these AI capabilities are starting to infuse into many different areas in the entire product stack. So whether it be from user workflow, we've seen it coming into the fore. We're seeing it in security. Huge amount of AI is going into the security layer and the security posture. And obviously into low code experiences in the Power Platform, we've seen an uplift in the capability in AI there. Simplified security, another key theme. So Microsoft has taken yet another stab at the branding of the products and the naming of the product. And what we ended up with is a much simpler kind of security posture in terms of understanding how the products fit together and how they can protect us in the environments that we work with. Far better integration and capability. And Mark will be chatting a little bit about some of that security stuff towards the back end of the presentation and what's new and interesting there. And then lastly, vertical solutions. So one of the things that was interesting a couple of years ago, Microsoft started to go down this route of really bundling their products in just kind of pre-built accelerators for specific industries. And we all looked at it a bit questioning. And what's great to see that's carried on that journey. So what we've seen is that the Cloud 4 model has been adopted and increased. So we've seen, for example, the Cloud for Healthcare, which is one of the first ones, that's in GA already. They've added more capabilities and continued the development. The Cloud for Financial Services is now GA, which means we can look to use it in production environment. They've spoken about Cloud for Manufacturing, which is in preview, as well as Cloud for Nonprofit in preview. So what this really is a set of accelerated capabilities that help those industries with a pre-built cloud configuration for their specific use cases. So it's great to see that the Microsoft continued investment in that, and certainly something we're keen to chat to our customers about and help them understand if they're in those industries, how they could look to adopt some of those capabilities from Microsoft. So really key themes, rich information anywhere, AI is appearing everywhere, security is a lot simpler to understand, and Microsoft is continuing on the vertical solution stack. So now my section of the presentation, I'm going to focus on some of the digital elements, and when we get to Mark, he's going to focus on kind of that underlying foundational or infrastructure elements. So on the digital side, I'll start off chatting a bit about collaboration platforms and what's happened over there. So really the big announcement from Microsoft was Microsoft is a brand new product. We kind of thought something like this was coming. We saw it on the radar at previous build conferences and previous Ignites, not with a name yet. Now we have a name for this thing. And Microsoft is releasing a product soon called Microsoft Loop. So what is Microsoft Loop? Really, it's a universal interactive canvas for creation of all kinds. At the same time, they spoke about a capability called Context IQ, which we'll touch on as well. And these two products are really just a way to reimagine how you could do collaboration, where we don't necessarily use documents and PowerPoint slides, as I'm using over here, for kind of that sort of interaction. So really interesting stuff. So a little bit more detail. What is Microsoft Loop? So we expect it to arrive in calendar year 2022 at some point, available for us to start working with in a preview and then ultimately a GA feature. Really what it is an always on connected canvas. So what this means is that you're in this canvas, you can author and you can create content. It's always connected and it's updating real time from whoever's collaborating on working on that particular content. What's interesting is Microsoft did forecast that something like this was going to happen. Way back in Ignite 2019, they released a capability that we blogged about called the Fluid Framework. Really interesting. And this is the underlying technology that allows Loop to exist as a component. So if we look at Loop, it's probably worth breaking down a little bit more detail how it fits together and what it is. So excuse me, the first thing is Loop components. So Loop components, what is that? It's a unit of collaboration. So think about a Loop component as being a list or a customer record from Dynamics. And what will happen is these components are completely connected across Office 365. I can take a component and I can embed it in the Teams chat and I can interact with that component, have other people interact with that component, and those updates will be real time in that chat. At the same time, that exact same component, I could embed in an email content and someone can interact with that as well. So that's what components are. They're these interactive little widgets that we can essentially connect to. What's interesting about the Loop components is obviously when they launch, ultimately into preview, into GA, everything in 365 will be connected to it, but obviously customers have their own line of business systems. And one of the things you may look to do is with your line of business systems, as well as ISVs out there, is you want the data in those line of business systems to be able to be exposed as Loop components so people can see and interact with them wherever they are in that kind of office space. And there's an extension framework for Loop built on top of Microsoft Graph, which is already used today ubiquitously across Microsoft Search in the 365 space. So if you connect Graph to your line of business application or ISVs connect Graph to their applications, those things will then start to be available that we can then use as Loop components. So that component, think about a little widget like a list or something like that, or a customer record. Loop pages. So Loop page is interesting. A Loop page is really the canvas that you can interact with other users on. So this is where you're going to type, you're going to interact, you're going to vote, but you're also going to put these Loop components as well as the other Office content into those Loop pages. So the way I like to think about it is it looks very much like a wiki style editing canvas with multiple collaboration, but the content on that when you put the Loop components is real time and it stays up to date with whatever data source that it's looking at. And then we have Loop Workspaces. So Loop Workspace is essentially a collection of Loop pages, and that's almost something like where you create a project with a whole bunch of Loop pages that define content around that project. So this is what we see coming. We've got a couple of screenshots of what this looks like. So over here, we can see the idea of a Loop component. This is a very simple Loop component, which is a table, essentially, a voting table that they've put in. And what's happened is this has been created inside of a Microsoft Teams chat window or IM window, and as people interact with that, that thing updates real time as it goes through the stream. So really interesting. There's another example over here of a D365 record. This is the Loop component for D365 record being directly embedded into a Teams chat, and as that record gets updated, it will be updated dynamically inside of the Teams chat, as well as if, for example, you put that Loop component into an email, we'd have the same kind of capability. The interesting thing is, straight after Ignite, Microsoft quickly explained that Loop components are actually available today in a preview mode, so you can actually start to test this first capability inside of Teams. They are preview, so you would have to turn on the experimental features to get access to that, but certainly available. If you go into Teams, they'll be called live components, soon to be renamed to Loop, the official name, and you can actually start to play with some of this technology and understand how it could maybe assist you moving forward. This is what Loop pages and workspaces look like. So if you look at a Loop page over here, really it's content where multiple people can interact on that page real time at the exact same time. And obviously we can put our components onto that, or Loop components. And Loop Workspace is essentially an organized set of pages that you could have available. So we can start to see Loop is really going to play a role for this online knowledge worker collaboration space. So instead of necessarily trying to put all this content into Word documents that move back and forth with versioning, etc., we can actually start to have real-time updated Loop Workspaces where that content sits and people can interact. There's a lot still to be announced around the Loop platform, I feel. There's a lot about how it's actually going to integrate with Teams maybe in future, how it's actually going to deploy as apps on devices, but really interesting space coming down the line, and something certainly to keep an eye on that we're quite excited about accordingly. Context IQ. So this is the other one that was announced pretty much at the same time as the Loop capability. So really what Context IQ is Microsoft using its AI capability that's built into Microsoft 365 to really predict and find information you're looking for when you're writing content. So it's embedded into the Microsoft editor. The Microsoft editor, what is it? That's the thing that you're actually typing into when you're writing an email in Outlook, or whether you're writing content inside of a Teams chat. That editor window is what we're talking about over here. So Context IQ will be embedded into that, and what it's going to do for you, it allows you to tag people, which we can already do, but also to be able to bring up relevant information based on what you're typing. So the simple example over here that they demonstrated is talking about a recent doc that Mona wrote, automatically find that document, put the link in there with that document, and then be able to tag out Mona, who's the person that you're supposed to interact with about that document. So the great thing, the idea is it'll make intelligent completion of what you're trying to do. So you don't have to break out of that and to go search for the window. So one of the biggest frustrations people have, knowledge workers or information workers, is trying to find content. The last thing you want to do is break out of writing an email, go into SharePoint, go around the search bar, try to find the document, get the link, share it, and put it into your email. What you want to do is, as you're writing the email, based on your context, be able to pull in the information that's correctly relevant at that time. And that's what Context IQ is aiming to achieve for us, also to be released in 2022.
Yes, I really thought it was quite exciting in the demo where they actually showed Context IQ, not just suggesting people or Office documents, but it was also understanding that, hey, this conversation is about an opportunity that it was in Dynamics, or the demo actually showed 100%. An opportunity in SAP. So it has that intelligence to recognize the work record from another system.
100%. And the underlying technology behind all of that, as I said, is Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft Graph ships with the connector frameworks that you can actually connect Microsoft Graph to your different products. So what ISVs has started to do, when we look at the likes of SAP and others, they've built these connectors to be able to go ahead. Microsoft has also built connectors for some of the vendors as well. So what happens is you're able to start pulling that information into Graph. So Graph is what's actually powering that ability to look up records in other systems, whether it be Microsoft or other ISVs. And like I said, if you've got a custom built system, something that's proprietary in your organization, quite easy to go and build your connector for that. So we've seen it, there's connectors for ServiceNow, there's connectors for Confluence, these types of tools that you might want to pull that data in, either into Loop or into Context IQ. And just by enabling that, you get that capability. Awesome. So rolling on, the next big statement that they made was they spoke about the metaverse. So this has been a bit of a buzzword of late, with Facebook first and now Microsoft using the same language. What I did think was good is they gave a quite nice, succinct definition of what the metaverse is. And I thought I'd just put that up there to try and play it out. So really what they're saying is it's persistent, and the key word is persistent, digital world that is inhabited by digital twins of people, places, and things. So what we're trying to do is create this kind of AR virtual reality world where we have representations of the people who are interacting, as well as physical objects. So using IoT to be able to represent the IT objects inside of that world, essentially, as well as places. The word persistent is really important. The idea being you will create the world or the room, and then what would happen is that room remains. And then what you do is you go into that room and you interact with the artifacts. So that's quite an important distinction about what it actually is. But remains to be seen, obviously, how well we move forward. The great thing is, it's not just talk, there's actually action behind this. So a little while ago, we got our hands on some obviously surfaces, and we got Mesh. And Mesh was a tool that was available as a standalone capability that we did a bit of playing with. What Microsoft has now done is actually taking Mesh and they've integrated it into Teams. So what this means is that when you interact with Teams, you're actually able to start using these immersive experiences. So what is it? So Mesh is essentially the ability to create an immersive space. So this is a location, a physical thing represented in the world. So you could create, for example, a meeting room, a physical three-dimensional meeting room that people can then interact with through that. You interact with it by using mixed reality headsets or just natively directly in the Teams client be able to work with that content. And the key thing is you're able to start to share content and collaborate in a spatial manner. So a lot to come on this. What are we going to get in the initial release? Well, the first thing you're going to get is when you join Teams, you'll be able to join Teams as an avatar over the static picture or video. So as you can see, there might be a static picture. Typically in Teams, if someone has the video off, what will happen is that can be replaced with the avatar representing that person, who will obviously take on facial expressions and non-verbal cues accordingly, as opposed to using video. The second thing is Microsoft will come with pre-built spaces. So when it releases, they will release a whole set of pre-built spaces that will allow us to interact and work with the technology stack accordingly. What's also going to happen in that initial release, you'll be able to create your own spaces. And I think a large success of Microsoft over here is going to be when we get our hands in this, how easy are they going to make it for organizations to author or create their own spaces that you can then obviously interact with Mesh for Teams. So Mesh for Teams, really interesting. We expect it in H1 2022. Like I said, we've had the opportunity, fortunately, with HoloLens to work with it, to play with it as an outside of Teams thing. It's now embedded into Teams, so I'll be able to really set up these meetings in a workspace with my virtual reality boardroom, share content collaboratively, and use my VR headset to interact with that accordingly. So quite exciting space and time to be around as we see this product and capability evolve. So very simple initial release, but we'll certainly see it take on a life of its own as it moves forward. So one of the things we want to think about is preparing for this collaboration. So with all these tools and capabilities coming, what are things, practical things that you can do now? So one of the key things is thinking about what's going to be happening with Loop and Context IQ, and specifically with Loop. Think about your current collaboration spaces. Think about the tools that you either have today or will have in future around your web style type wiki solutions. We really think that Loop could be a good replacement and a really interactive feature for that. So think about in your planning, maybe holding off or getting content ready for a Loop-based adoption accordingly. The other thing you could do is have a look at Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft is increasingly using Microsoft Graph under the hood to power a huge amount of these experiences and to pull that AI context around data that isn't natively inside of 365. So looking at building connectors or adopting connectors for the ISV products you may already have and linking them up into Microsoft Graph certainly is going to empower a lot of these experiences moving forward. So quite key to think about picking up Graph and connecting it into your systems or through your ICV vendors. So that's the collaboration space. There's a whole bunch more announced. So just changing tack a little bit. Good stuff happening around collaboration, a lot more announced, but those are the key things we felt we should chat about. The next one over here is business applications. So this is where we say, what's really happening around Dynamics and the Power Platform space? What did Microsoft talk about? So one of the things I did at Ignite today is a bit of repositioning on an existing set of products. So they've announced a thing called the Custom Experience Platform, and really the way to think about that is the group name for how you would use the suite of products that is available today directly inside of Dynamics 365 and the rest of Office. And really what the Custom Experience Platform is, it's really taking the capability of interaction with your customers and providing users ease of use from the entire journey, from beginning to end of that customer. So really, controlling your customer data and deliver that connected experience. AI is infused in this whole process. So the flow of your customer from the moment that customer hits your website to the moment you've closed the first deal to the ongoing servicing of that customer, that entire journey should be mapped out and modeled, and the interactions that the customer have should be driven by AI that uniquely tailors the experience that customer has based on information that we've collected and we know about that customer and their responses to previous content. So that's what the customer experience platform is aiming to drive for us. How is it enabled? So like I said, really it's just a repositioning of existing Microsoft products, but really now focus them in a nice, neat structure so we can understand how to adopt. So it starts off by two key products, and the key products here are Dynamics 365 Custom Insights and Dynamics 365 Marketing. These are the two products. So Customer Insights is the primary tool that allows us to gain insights around the data that we have around our customers, and Marketing is how we orchestrate actions based on the data we've collected on those customers. Those are the two main capabilities that build up that branded customer experience platform. Underneath the hood, we have the other capabilities in Dynamics, the things that allow us to act. So the sales module, the services app, and obviously commerce, if you're doing commerce, be it retail or in-store activity. Again, extended by other capability Microsoft. So we have Microsoft Advertising and Clarity for web interaction, and the brand new voice channel, which I'll chat on just now. So the customer experience platform, the way to think about it, I've drawn this picture up just to kind of illustrate how it fits together. It's really three tiers. It's going to be about data. So customer insights is the thing that provides us intelligence around that data, ably supported by Synapse Analytics for more advanced type scenarios, combining that information together, and then Clarity for web-based interaction. Orchestration, where the real meat of this happens, is going to be driven by Dynamics Marketing, and then obviously activation or action. So based on somebody completing a marketing journey, activation happens in sales or in customer service or through some sort of commerce channel driven through Dynamics Commerce. So this is really how those products fit together. And if you want a single slide, I've put this one together to make it simple. This explains really what is actually in the box in that customer experience platform. The great thing is these products now integrate beautifully and seamlessly across the board. So there's very little work you have to do to get up and running once you've elected to go down this particular path. Last thing that's definitely worth chatting on in that dynamic space is the voice channel for customer service, which is now going GA. So we've known about it for some time. It's been improved, and we have the opportunity to play with it and kind of poke at it and use it in some trial or test scenarios. It's now gone GA, which means we can use it fully in productionized environment. What is it? It is essentially Microsoft taking full calling and call center capability and contact capability and embedding that directly inside of the Dynamics 365 customer service product, which means that my users from a single pane of glass can interact with customer data as well as the actual customer in a voice enabled way. So this means we don't necessarily have to use third-party products and bolt these bits together. It means that we remove that issue we had of siloed data, some data living in our call platform and some data living in our CRM platform. We now merge these two capabilities together. So out of the box, it's going to launch with voice capabilities, obviously the ability to dial out and receive inbound dialing, SMS capabilities, digital messaging. As we mentioned, Dynamics for Commerce allows us to do digital messaging, IVR, so IVR capabilities. You can build your own low-code workflows to drive the IVR conversation through Power Virtual Agents. Transcription, so automatic transcription of a call data and be able to capture that call data transcription directly into Dynamics against the customer's record. Translation and real-time sentiment analysis. So understand if the customer is happy or sad or angry, depending on how their conversation is going. Providing call recording, key tenant capability, outbound calling, obviously skills-based routing, so the ability to route the call based on the skill of the agent and what the person has essentially selected through some IVR process, and supervisor monitoring. There are many other features, but these are the core ones that we're gonna see come to the fore. And this is available today to start being turned on in customer tenants.
So Piers, given that long list of features that are there today and it's now generally available, from my mind, I expect our clients are going to be looking at this and maybe reconsidering their omni-channel path here.
Yeah, so I think the whole idea is to enable omni-channel, and voice is a huge part of that omni-channel path. Microsoft has now got this as a first-party solution built into the product. Microsoft is still obviously supporting all their ISV vendors who have excellent capabilities and have built-in connectivity between their products as well as the Dynamics product. Microsoft will still continue to support that. And it's not necessarily to say a customer who's on one of those third-party products needs to suddenly jump off and go into the Dynamics space. For new customers who are going greenfields or looking for a complete refit anyway, this is a great option to go. There's still quite a long way to go. It's an amazing product, but there's still features that Microsoft will be adding over time to the voice channel that will get it on par with some of the kind of third-party solutions, have some additional features, but we'll certainly see that come to the fore over time. So if you're looking at this space in particular, it's definitely worth having a look at this capability in Microsoft if you're looking to adopt now. If you're with an existing technology stack that's well integrated into Dynamics 365 at this point, not necessarily for you to rip and replace just because Microsoft's coming with the product, but it might be something you'd look at on your roadmap as they develop their product capabilities further into the future. Obviously, this is built on the back of the Teams infrastructure, right? So it's got all that kind of global connectivity capability that we expect and reliability. So when we look at that customer experience platform, some things to think about. How do you think about adopting the customer experience platform? So really what I've done is I've played out what is the set of capabilities of product that Microsoft has kind of bundled together. Where do you start in this journey? So just some tips, and obviously we can spend time with any of the customers who are interested to have a discussion about this and work out a roadmap, but very high level tips. The first thing you want to do is get that foundation right. And to get the foundation right, you need to get the data sources in order. Can't have intelligence around customer data unless you identify the data sources and start to sort them out. How do you sort them out? Well, the first thing you want to be doing is ingesting data with custom insights. So load the data into custom insights, tag the data, prepare the data, make it then be available so we can start to generate intelligence around that. There's also potential need to use Synapse Analytics, depending on the complexity and the workflow inside of your particular environment. Once you've got that piece sorted out, then it's about turning on the modules in Dynamics that make sense for your business workflow. So sales, service, or commerce, or potentially all three, depending on the industry you're specifically in. What I will say over here, some customers today probably already have Dynamics for sales or Dynamics for service in the environment. There's still an opportunity to go back and obviously start now to turn on customer insights, ingest that data, and provide some intelligence around what you're doing. Once you've got that core foundation right, that's when you look to extend with the other capabilities that really form part of the customer experience platform. So looking at clarity, for example, to understand how web interactions are happening, if that's one of your channels. Looking at connected spaces. So again, don't have time to talk about everything at Ignite. One of the key features, Microsoft has made significant investment in the IT space and connectivity of IT within Dynamics. Rebranded and updated, now called Connected Spaces, really the ability to connect the data sets, so in-store locations using IoT, pulling that information into your Dynamics platform to essentially help with that customer journey. Customer service voice channel, once you've got the Bedrock enabled, you can start to look at the voice channel, and then obviously Power Virtual Agents and Power Automate for workflow type capability, whether it be driven through IVR or chatbot or actual backend workflow capability. That's a very quick summary. Obviously, there's a lot more to that. Main point in this slide is you want to do custom insights. You want to create a great customer experience using that platform. First step is let's get the data set in order to allow you to build that intelligence and build the other features on top of that. Again, nothing wrong from a Dynamics perspective about spinning up a trial environment and starting to test out some of these capabilities in a non-production state so you can get familiar with that. And we can help you with that as well. Last little set from me then, just want to talk a little bit about the Power Platform. So it wouldn't be an Ignite without information around the Power Platform. So Microsoft's juggernaut in the low-code arena, top by Gartner, continues to advance. So a couple of key announcements over there. So one of them is BYOM, or Bring Your Own Model. So Microsoft has the AI Builder capability in the Power Platform. This allows low-code developers to build apps that use AI. What they did on the initial release and subsequent is they've created pre-built models you can use. So image recognition, forms recognizer can read an expense claim and pull data off automatically. But many customers today have their own models that they've built over time, or will be looking to build very specific industry models or unique proprietary models where data scientists has gone and authored an AI model. what Microsoft has given us the ability to do now is not only use the pre-built AI models that they've got, actually connect existing customer models into that low-code ecosystem, which means very easily I can go build a Power App or a Power Automate flow directly on top of an existing AI model that has been built inside of a customer environment. So really interesting capability, just again, extending what we can do with Power Platform. So that was a really interesting one for us. We have come across this a number of times in customer environments. So really exciting for us that that's come to the fore. Power Platform native apps. So one of the big things, so everyone is now a mobile developer, more potentially. So what it means is if you're able to go into Power Apps today and you've built up the skills in that low-code platform and you can build an app that sits on a mobile device, previously you would deploy that app, essentially would be deployed and rendered out through the Power App shim, which is essentially running on your mobile phone, and you get to select the Power App that's been shared to you. What we can do now is deploy that app as a truly native app on Android and iOS. There's a process you go through. That app then ends up on the customer's phone or on your user's phone, and it looks exactly the same as any other native app. So it's got the direct branding, the single icon, you click in it and you open that app. What this really does, it means that those low-code developers can now build true, proper mobile applications and deploy them as native apps. So really exciting. What it gives you the ability to do as well is many organizations may go and create a number of Canvas apps, for example, for expense claims or for travel requisitions or these things, build these individual apps. You can group those together in a single app. When you click on that app, it'll give you the menu options and you launch into each of those individually, deployed as a single mobile application. So that's awesome. These things are distributed natively, which means they can be distributed through traditional channels where those users are. And most importantly, enterprise governance with Intune. So all of these mobile apps can then be managed with the Intune technology stack underlying to make sure we control and we govern what's happening in that particular environment. So this is a great news for many of us who've been building these Power Apps and kind of just these mobile apps. It's been a little bit not an awesome experience. Now we can have a really true native mobile experience. So something quite exciting there. And the last kind of big thing to know about, I think, in this kind of business apps space is the Power Platform pay-as-you-go. So what is it? Essentially, what we found is that customers who build Power Apps maybe build a Power App that everyone in the organization wants to use. So maybe 800 staff members, and maybe they only have one Power App. So Microsoft has a licensing model in the past called Power App per user, which basically means you get to use that single Power App. The challenge with that licensing model is if, for example, this app that we built from a whole organization to work with was a leave request app or something like that, maybe the users are only going to use that app twice a year, and you're essentially paying that license every single month. So what the pay-as-you-go model now allows us to do is it allows us to have that per app per user license only billed for the month that the user uses the application, which means in my example over there, if I only apply for leave in December, guess what? My $5 or $10, whatever it is, for that license only gets charged on that particular month. No other time that I'm using it, not using it throughout the year. So it's really a good capability that's been enabled. And what it means is we fully see the adoption of Power Apps more broadly for these more broader applications used by entire organizations being adopted. How they've done this, really it's driven through Azure consumption. So really what you're doing over here is you're linking up your Power Apps subscription to your Azure consumption, i.e. your Azure subscription, and these licenses are then billed per month based on actual utilization. So true consumption based. A couple of other things that added under the hood. So one of the challenges we have is making sure we get enough space procured inside of Dataverse. So this is where data gets stored for the Dynamics and the Power App platform. So what we have is additional storage can also now be aligned to this consumption-based model. If you need help with understanding all of this, because there is a 170-page licensing document on the Power Platform, we're happy to help you work through what's best for your organization. This is exciting because this means we should see wider adoption of broad use Power Apps without having to buy those full licenses in the customer space, ultimately costing customers less for the same functionalities. Quite an exciting one.
Yeah, Piers, as the pay-as-you-go licensing concept is something we've seen brought into the Azure Virtual Desktop world a few months ago.
Yeah.
And the actual nuance about when to get the best value out of pay-as-you-go, and then also how you achieve it with your solution as well. There is some nuance there. So I definitely recommend customers have a chat with us to actually figure out how to achieve it well.
Yeah, 100%. As with any of the licensing things around some of these platforms, it's good to work with someone who knows what they're doing. We've got a team dedicated and available to assist with this. But the key announcement over here, it's going to be an interesting take, and certainly we can help save our customers money in terms of the broad adoption of Power Platform in their organizations moving forward. So that's it from me. I've taken a lot of time, Mark, probably too much. Apologies. So what we covered over there was all the digital elements, really the big announcements that I thought would be impactful. Hopefully you found that interesting. So over to you, Mark.
Perfect. Thanks, Piers. As always, lots to know about the world of code and what's happening above the foundational pieces, which is where I like to play. Foundationally, Ignite had a number of announcements, always too many to talk about in a brief session. The usual things were there of new VMware, new VM types, sizes, upgrades to net storage and networking capabilities. We'll let everyone go and have a look for those. But what I've done today is I've picked out the top 4 announcements that we know will have the most impact and relevance to many of our clients at MOQ. The first, let's start at number 4. Let's talk about Azure Arc Agent for VMware. Azure Arc continues to be a continuing evolving solution within Azure. Now, we've had Azure Arc for a while. We've been waiting for this VMware vSphere integration. For those who haven't heard about Azure Arc is probably Microsoft's answer to, you may be familiar with modern management for endpoint devices and Intune and all of the great capabilities there and how it really allows us to manage our devices in a modern way. Azure Arc is doing that for customers, on-premise servers and all of the, let's call it quote unquote, traditional infrastructure that might not be in Azure. So Azure Arc lets you take that concept of how to manage something and the way that you would manage it in Azure. You can now apply that same management principle, the same tooling, the same way that you do it in Azure. You can apply that management capability to something that's in your on-premise data center or in your retail store. Arc's been around probably for about 12 months now. We've had clients looking at it and using it in different ways. The VMware vSphere integration is what we've been waiting for though, because what it actually allows now is Arc to understand people's on-premise VMware vSphere infrastructures. We know our clients have massive investments in compute, in tin. They've got massive investments in training of their staff and their organizations in the use of VMware products. But this integration now lets you still work with those capabilities and tools, but you can start to apply Azure management principles to them. Azure Arc generally is a really big theme for Microsoft. You're seeing more and more features turn up, so much so Microsoft is partnering with organizations like ourselves. MOQdigital is certainly one of them, to help organizations jumpstart their modern management with Azure Arc. If you're interested in getting VMware vSphere running, it's a private preview. We can help clients get onto that, but we're also offering help for just getting people understanding what Arc is about too. Number 3 for us, we'll move on to what is the probably a fairly standard thing that happens at Ignite is we've had some Defender products rebranded. Now, this it wouldn't be Ignite without a rebranding for Defender. Specifically, we've had Microsoft Cloud App Security and Security Center, amongst others, rolled into a new brand called Microsoft Defender for Cloud. The best part of this announcement, though, is now we have the protections for AWS workloads. So for those who have worked with Defender and Security Center, you'll understand that there's the concept of Azure security policy templates, and these policies allow customers and clients to understand what is happening in their Azure environment. You know, do we have the best security model around our storage? Do we actually understand what is our vulnerability position for our virtual machines in Azure? We can now actually apply that same thinking and that same policy, that same auditability to AWS workloads. Out of the box, there are a ton of different things that Defender for Cloud can pick up on. Things to keep in mind, it can now recognize EC2 instance configuration changes, things like security group configuration changes, and it does an anomaly detection as well. So things like, hey, we've had a database have in AWS have a ton of queries out of it. Queries that don't look like normal client applications. It actually looks like someone's actually doing a select all statement out of the database. It can now understand that for databases and VMs running in AWS. A great new feature, and it continues to show that Microsoft's quite happy for their clients to run in all clouds, not just theirs.
So Mark, if I understand these two announcements right, so around obviously Arc for vSphere and obviously Defender for Cloud, taking care of Amazon. Really, it seems what Microsoft is doing over here is making sure that our customers will in future have the ability, really from a single pane of glass, single operational environment, be able to, manage my VMs wherever they may be, whether those VMs are on-premise running through Arc, whether my VMs are running in vSphere, whether my VMs are running in AWS, whether my VMs are running in Azure, I could do that. And from a security perspective, same thing, right? So manage the security doesn't really matter from a single pane of glass from that Azure environment.
That's exactly right. Solve the problem once and then apply it everywhere.
Awesome.
And that's sort of, you'll find this interplay. We move into number 2 and number 1. Number 2 here I've noted as vulnerability management now is available for Android and iOS devices. So this feature, vulnerability management capability in Azure, has been available in Security Center initially for Windows client and server OSs. More recently, we've added, Microsoft have added Linux OSs in there. So we can now start to do vulnerability management for Red Hat and Ubuntu, for example. Most recently, excitingly, they've announced now that we can also do it for mobile devices, Android and iOS. Our clients, quite often the challenge they have is we need to do vulnerability management to keep us in compliance with PCI, ISO standards, etc. And what happens is they have a good answer for Windows OS, and then we get, or in their server world, but then when they start to talk about mobile device fleets that aren't running Windows, you need to choose another tool. We don't need to do that anymore. We've now got the ability to bring vulnerability management and security posture reporting in the same way we do it for all of the other things that we have in our solutions. We do it for Android and iOS. For iOS, it's about your vulnerability management of your OS on the device, and Android does that too. What Android does over and above the iOS offering, though, is we can now do vulnerability management for apps that are running on the Android device. So, we're pretty comfortable with iOS. Hey, you can only get your apps from the App Store. There's a reasonable level of comfort there, but we know the good and the bad of Android there is that users can get apps from anywhere. Even the place, the Google Play Store, which is seen as probably the best place to get apps from, regularly has apps available within it that are malicious. So when these apps that are noted as malicious get reported, and we have security bulletins or notifications given out and published generally worldwide, the Microsoft security team puts that into their security graph, and then all of a sudden we'll start to see the reporting show up in Azure saying, hey, of your fleet of 200 Android devices out there, you've got 12 that have this particular known malicious app installed, and then it will give mitigation actions and also talk about what can be done to solve that, be it uninstalled, and you'll actually see that the user gets, as soon as it's noted, the user will actually get a prompt on their app if it's managed by Intune to say, hey, this one's known vulnerable and it's known malicious, let's remove it now. A really good feature, and once again it rounds out that story of we can do it for servers, we can do it for Windows, we can do it for Linux, and now we can do it for our mobile devices as well. One tool to do vulnerability management across the board.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So again, everything just coming together, right?
That's it. And then number 1 I have is Chaos Studio. May not have popped on to that many radars if you were following the announcements for Ignite and you're watching the live streams, but this one I feel is going to be really relevant and solve a problem that we regularly see our clients having. Because we help clients get to Azure, migrate there, and ourselves, we also develop applications to run on Azure. We just basically, and the challenge of this migration is that when we put these applications on there, because the cloud's new and it adds some different dynamics to the solving the architecture of the solution, quite often when it comes to testing and when we talk about failover testing or availability, that's quite challenging in the Azure concept or in any cloud. Chaos Studio actually lets you solve that problem. It's built around the concept of chaos engineering. If you haven't heard of that before, that's the discipline of experimenting on a system to build confidence in its behavior to withstand fault or turbulent conditions when something's not quite the way it should be. All applications work well when everything's in place and the world is perfect, but quite often the internet adds challenges when we're deploying globally dispersed applications. Things like latency become a real challenge to understand how it works and actually how to simulate that in testing as well. So Chaos Studio, what it actually allows our clients to do is to define a fault, be that something like CPU pressure or disk I/O pressure, a DNS failure. Define that as and then also define where that fault type should be applied and how it should be applied. So, and that's actually becomes an ARM resource that can be built into our solutions. And where we expect that this will get the biggest uptake is our customers that are doing CI/CD pipelines. Part of their CI/CD pipeline is testing that the application works. Now we just add in a Chaos Studio test as well. So we're not just testing our new code that it works perfectly when everything's good, but we're also adding in a test to prove that our new code can handle a failure situation or can handle someone running with network latency above a certain level, or if we can handle a complete Kubernetes failure.
So Mark, I can certainly see that having huge value, right? Because I know in the apps that we build and what we build for our customers, very often we build really good, robust kind of DR capabilities and failover scenarios, but really it's quite hard to test those every time you do a deployment. And I think with something like this, what this allows us to do is, as we make application changes, etc., sure, all of our test coverage will tell us we haven't broken the app, but how do we actually go about making sure our app still responds to these kinds of conditions effectively? So having Chaos Studio potentially available for us, adding into this pipeline means as we're making changes, we're able to make sure we haven't broken our ability for resiliency. So I think that's going to be a really excellent tool set, as you say, moving forward, and quite keen to get our hands on that one.
Yeah, the fact that it's treated as an experiment, the fact that you can go, well, we're pretty sure we might have a challenge in this area. We run the experiment in that area and go, okay, we now see the behavior in app, we'll make a change. And we can also change that test, push it a little bit harder or push it a little bit less to learn the breaking points. And something that, in a more traditional sense, those non-real world failures, you could pull a cable or pull the power out the back of a server. We can essentially equate that into the cloud equivalents here and do it in a repeatable manner that we can measure. Really quite excited to get that into our customers' solutions. And that's the four. There were many more, but these are the ones that I think will be really impactful to our clients that we work with on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, that was excellent, Mark. Yeah, absolutely. Some great announcements over there, I think. So really just in summary, we look to kind of wrap this up before we take some questions. So what did we notice? So what we know is Microsoft still continue on the innovation train, right? The sheer volume of announcements, improvements and capability is quite staggering, frankly. And what our job here is to take those, distill it down and make sure it can be relevant for our customers. But really it keeps going forward. They've continued to increase the capability of PaaS and SaaS offerings. What we're starting to see now, though, however, is definitely the seamless end-to-end experience as these products start to come together, as we start to see dynamics really and truly play up in Teams, and Teams is suddenly starting to play a role in Dynamics. And AI, as I said, is playing a role everywhere. The continued investments and the integration of these products is really creating interesting scenarios as we move forward. The investments into the Power Platform AI and D365 are certainly playing off, as they now really have an entire space from a customer experience from cradle to grave. As Mark was going over there, the Bedrock security platforms really come full circle, because now we have the capability to essentially protect our customers in any cloud, on any device, wherever they may be. We've got a great solution to secure them and help them move forward, as well as being able to manage the infrastructure wherever it may be with Arc and vSphere and so forth. And the last one is obviously what I mentioned up at the top, just to reiterate again, that industry verticalization. I think we're going to continue to see Microsoft heading down that path of really creating those almost pre-built accelerators and understanding the licensing and the components that you need in order to enable a for a specific solution. I think we're going to see that going forward. And really what that means is those customers in those industries will be able to start in really an accelerated position and not starting from the ground up. So I think all in all, for me, it was a fantastic conference. Lots of new stuff, lots of existing stuff going into GA, making it available, and lots of stuff forecast for what we're going to see in future that we can start to make our plans around. So really a good conference, I think, from Microsoft. In terms of some next steps, so sure, happy to help anyone. So please reach out to your account manager or director of our sales channel. Myself and Mark and the rest of the solution professionals that we have in the environment, keen to come and talk to you about any of the features that we meant today or anything else that you picked up from Ignite, help understand how that may be adopted in your environment or what it could mean for your roadmap. Happy to spend some time with you and work through that technology and understanding where that fits in. The book of news, so we went through maybe 10 items today. The book of news is really Microsoft one-stop shop summary of everything at Ignite. Encourage you to go access the book of news. Contains all the announcements plus direct links to each of the individual blog posts, as well as relevant downloads in one single place. A great place to go. I mentioned the fact that the live components are available in chat. So this is the loop components. So there's a long URL, and I've created you a tiny URL there as well that you can go to if you wanted to go understand how you could start to activate and work with the very first nascent versions of Loop that are available today in an experimental fashion. So having said that, I think is what we've got from a content perspective. We've got a couple of minutes left. I don't know if there's any questions. You guys are welcome to post them through to Amelia.